listening to the weekly podcast wrap-up of Jedi News UK with your host, Teresa Delgado.
My name is Teresa Delgado. I'm a staff writer for Jedi News, and I'm going to be bringing you our podcast review wrap-up. And it will be in audio form, but there will also be a summary in written form for those of you that don't want to watch it as a YouTube video. The first episode that we are going to review is from We Talk Clones. It is episode number 519, which actually stands for Season 5, Episode 19 of the Clone Wars, and it is titled To Catch a Jedi. What We Talk Clones does is they record after an episode is aired, and they review the episode with the host and with special guests, and they like to see and analyze the episode so that maybe dive a little bit deeper into the episodes themselves. Each episode is always titled as the episode title from the actual show, so that makes it easy and nice to find. Also, We Talk Clones is a part of solosound.net. You can find them on the web at solosound.net. You can also find them in their Facebook group. You just need to search for We Talk Clones. They are under Twitter at We Talk Clones. So you can find them pretty much everywhere, and they're definitely willing to talk to you. And the hosts do have their own personal Twitter accounts that they also talk from. So you can definitely get in some FaceTime with the hosts of the show. This particular episode had the normal hosts, Stephen, Tom, and William, but their special guests were Riley from the Star Wars Report and Aaron. Also, these two people do have Twitter accounts that you can follow, and you can find Riley on the StarWarsReport.com and on the Star Wars Report podcast. So, what was this episode about? Well, this episode is part of the the finale of this particular season. And in the episode, there was a lot going on. I've seen it and talked about it with some people. I think this particular episode was kind of a hard one to discuss with people just because there's a lot of emotion running really high at this point because we really don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what is going to happen to Ahsoka. So, as far as the podcast episode itself, I think it was really well done. I actually think that Riley, as a guest, did a really good job. He had some great insights, and he really articulated himself very well. He even was able to bring up some very good points that I actually hadn't even thought of. The regular hosts also did a wonderful job. They always do when they're talking about Clone Wars episodes. They're very upfront with their views, and they don't tend to try to steer the conversation any one way. It's always really open, and it flows really well, and they really try to incorporate everyone's views and to not put down any one person. The one thing I really like about this particular episode is that they really were not too negative. Also, it is something to keep in mind that one of the hosts, William, has actually seen the full finale. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because he can't talk about certain things. So it ends up being the rest of the people that talk quite a bit about this episode. In this particular episode, they did go off on a tangent about the video game 1313, which I actually thought was kind of interesting. Sometimes I don't really like tangents in podcasts, but they always happen. It just really depends on what the tangent is really about. This one I thought was actually interesting because they were referencing 1313 and the levels of Coruscant, and they were referencing the levels of Coruscant in the actual episode and what those levels might actually mean. So it was pretty cool. And I really like that aspect of it. The show, for me, on this particular one, ran a little bit long. But that's probably due to a lot of the speculation and open questions that we all have with so much information being thrown at us so quickly. So I don't really want to fault them on that. But it is one to note that while they do usually run their episodes about an hour apiece, some of their episodes have been a little bit shorter. Some of them have been longer. I think with them sitting at about an hour is probably the best, just because it can get a little bit long. But I do understand when the episode has so much going on in it that there really is a ton to talk about. So that definitely makes sense to me, and I can see why that happened. I will say that at times I did get a little bit bored, and I don't think that was to any fault of the hosts, because I have listened to their show quite a bit and I normally don't get bored. It might have just been the state I was in when I listened to it, and also the episode itself. While it really did intrigue me, I think there was just so much that was unknown, and I tend to not be a very big speculator, so that could be part of it. I did think that there was quite a bit of humor on this particular episode as well, and I think they did a really good job of balancing all of that out. So, if I had to give this particular episode a rating, I would say that this particular episode out of 10 was probably about an 8 out of 10. And that's only just because there are things that they have definitely done better and that I have heard on their show. But I really did like the coverage that they give. Also, I want to say that this particular podcast, as far as a Clone Wars review podcast, always gives fresh perspective. I would recommend this one to anyone out there that loves the Clone Wars series. This is one that you should definitely listen to and move into your repertoire as far as reviews of the Clone Wars. So, I hope the guys like the review. Again, like I said, I think they did a really good job. They've just had way better episodes than this one, but I can't wait to hear what their review is going to be on the final episode, when we finally get to hear William be able to reveal everything that he has seen already that we haven't. Check it out. We Talk Clones. The second podcast that I'm going to cover is the Sarlacc Pit podcast. This particular podcast is the official podcast of GalacticBinder.com. It is on iTunes under the Sarlacc Pit podcast, and you can actually find them on Twitter as well, which I believe is at Sarlacc Pit Cast, so you can definitely check them out there. This was actually the first time that I had listened to this particular show, but I knew that Dan Curto was going to be on this particular episode, so I made sure to find it and tune in, and now I'm subscribed, so that's going to be awesome. Also, I believe they do have a Facebook page. You can look for Sarlacc Pit Podcast. So, what does this podcast talk about? Well, I think I caught them on a not normal show, judging by what they were saying, because they said they usually pick a topic and then they really dive right into it. But with this one, they had Dan Curto on and they talked about a lot of different things. So many different things. It's going to be hard to make sure to mention them all. But their normal hosts are Matt, whose last name I'm not sure if I'm going to mess up, but maybe Kronicky, something like that, and Chris Hoth Ice Planet Smith, which I think is a really cool name. And I've never met these two guys. Hopefully I will get to meet them in the future. And Dan Curto was their guest. Dan Curto is from the Curto Burns Collectors cast, and he is also a part of Jedi News UK. So naturally I had to go and find the podcast that he was going to be on. On this particular show, this is episode 59. It's called Curtoing Hasbro, and this particular show, they covered a lot of things. They talked about Stuart Freeborn and about his passing. I thought that their discussion of this was actually really well done. They mentioned a lot of things that I hadn't heard before. They even played some audio from, I guess, a documentary, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it, about Stuart Freeborn and those kind of things, and it was really well done, and I think they did a really good job just recognizing him, recognizing what he did, and paying an homage to him. The next thing they talked about was John Williams. This particular section really caught my attention because I really love music. One of the things that I heard them say was that, there was really no reason that John Williams shouldn't do the music. I think that's true, and I really do agree with them about all of that, but I am also open to things changing up and using some different people. And this is one area that I had a little bit of an issue with the show, and it's just because they are from a different era than I am. I'm from the prequel era. Those are the ones that I saw in the movie theaters as opposed to these guys. And so this isn't to knock them in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just a little bit more open to change and a little bit more open to, maybe change is the wrong word. I'm a little bit more open to things that are not a part of the original trilogy. And these guys are really, really big fans of classic Star Wars, classic original trilogy. And so if anything, the only thing I had that was negative about this particular podcast is just that I would like a little bit more talk about non-classic Star Wars, but that's just me. It would never keep me from not listening to this podcast. I actually really like the show. That's just my only personal caveat. The only other negative thing for me is they play a lot of music in the background. And if you're someone like me, I tend to zoom in more on music than I do on dialogue. So I found myself drifting off into the world listening to the music and realizing that I was missing people talking. So I had to really make a concerted effort. There were times when the music was a lot softer, and when it was softer, I didn't listen to it as much. I could still tell it was there, but it didn't interfere with my listening experience. So those are my only two things. On the rest of this particular show, they talked about spin-off movies. This part of the episode was really, really cool. They really came up with some great scenarios for different things, like Han Solo spin-offs, where they could go with it, Obi-Wan Kenobi spin-offs and where they could go with them. They really brainstormed a lot, and that is an area that they really dug deep into, and they stayed on it for a long time, and I actually really enjoyed that. The last section was, of course, talking about Hasbro and Toy Fair and a lot of the things that are coming out. This was good for me as a toy collector. I got to hear some things that I've already heard before, but I did get to hear some new things, some new perspectives, and definitely some stuff as far as the articulation of figures and about how, things are going to be changing. And I actually do feel a little bit sorry for Hasbro after listening to this podcast and about, them having a line really designed that they had to change due to the change with the movies. I love the dynamic between Matt, Chris, and Dan. I think they did a really great job. There wasn't a lot of over-speaking. They gave each other a lot of time to talk, and they really appreciated what everybody was saying. And I thought they did a great job articulating their thoughts and their opinions and helping to lay it out for you so that you could see what they were talking about. I really look forward to the next episode of the show. I know that it is not a weekly show, but I really, really can't wait until the next one. So I'm really glad that I found it, and I'm really glad that Kurto was on it because it gave me a chance to really get to hear something different. Different hosts, different ideas, and I'm actually going to go back and listen to some of the previous podcasts so I can hear what they normally sound like when they really take one topic and dive right into it. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to give this episode a 9. It was really well done, and so good job, guys, over at Sarlacc Pit. I definitely recommend it, so go check out Sarlacc Pit Podcast.